Hey everyone, welcome to my escape. Today's video is going to be all about fairies. So the book community absolutely loves ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, obsessed with the series, and I'm just out here to say there are other fairy series. So if you just crushed that one and now you're in a book hangover, or that one wasn't really for you but you want to dip your toe into the fairy world, or maybe, you know what, spice isn't for you, I got some spice-free recommendations on this list as well, but this is all things fairy. So let's get into it. Disclaimer up front, these are fairies and F-A-E-R-I-E, not F-A-I-R-Y. Okay, two very, very distinctive groups, okay? You have fairies, which are evil, cunning, immortal, don't trust them. Pretty much if you end up in their world, you'll die. And then you have, like, Disney Tinkerbell, okay? We're not gonna worry about them, okay? We are all about the half-evil fairies. So just to knock the big names kind of out of the gate, ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, it is a 3-book series followed by a novella, followed by a 4th book that follows kind of a different sister. I have not read them all. I've read the first 2, I've started the 3rd. They're not my cup of tea. I really do love fairy stories. ACOTAR just isn't really it for me, but if you just want to get started or you want to know what all the hype is about, definitely go check those out. They're by Sarah J. Maas, and they're pretty much available absolutely everywhere. Another one by Sarah J. Maas, you have Crescent City. This is more of like contemporary. So for the ACOTAR one, it's set kind of in like, think peasant society, and then the main character crosses over into the fairy world, and then the rest of the series you kind of primarily you're in the fairy world. Whereas Crescent City, by my understanding, I haven't actually picked it up, by my understanding it's more of a contemporary world with a crossover with the fairies, so if that's more your vibe, go ahead from that. But because Sarah J. Maas is so popular and so big, pretty much everyone knows what her books are about, and if you don't, you can Google them easily. I want to move on to the other fairy stuff, okay? Fairies existed before Sarah J. Maas, they'll exist after, and there's a whole spectrum of in between that you can find whatever you're looking for with these reads. I want to start out with the YA, or the no spice. If you're not into spice, you don't want any smut in your books, these are smut free. First off, I have the Iron Fae series by Julia Kagawa. This was my first step into the fairy world. I read these middle school, high school, whatever they're kind of aged at. I loved it. The imagery is really good. I was like, I'm obsessed with this world. I want to go to like the fairy land, except it's real dangerous, so they also have that in there. Iron Fae series is quite long. I don't think I made it all the way through it. Yes, I'm terrible at finishing series. I don't like things to end, so often I will leave like the last book or so. But when I actually picked up this series, the whole thing wasn't published yet. So I think I've read the first 4, and they all follow the one girl, and then the next 3 follow her brother, I believe, but I haven't picked any up about the brother. But it's a mix of contemporary world and the Fae world, so they kind of go back and forth, but primarily the books I read, they were more in the fairy world. Lots of fun, very Shakespeare-esque, lots of nods to the play and Midsummer's Night's Dream and all that. So if you like that, I would definitely check these out. I did do a reread of the first 2 in 2022. I found them to be a little young for me now, but I still love them. They still give me the nostalgia, so really it's, can you fit yourself to the audience is what those books are really about. Another series that's spice-free, but less fairiness, is the Mortal Instruments. So the Mortal Instruments has fairies in them, they have the fairy world in them, but fairies are not the main part of the story. So the Mortal Instruments series, very iconic YA series. If you don't know it, it's basically shadow hunters are like descendants of angels, and they have special powers that allow them to hunt demons. And they kind of control the demon offspring, so you have werewolves, vampires, fairies, all that sort of things. They make up the downworld, so the angel descendants, the Nephilim, the shadow hunters, they kind of police the downworld while also killing off the demons to kind of protect the planet. So they interact with the fairies, they go to the fairy world for like little sections of the book. The whole series does not revolve around the fairies, you're not really deeply immersed in them, but they absolutely are in there, and it does give you a good look into the fairy world, and I like it because it kind of keeps like the mystery and the mystique of it, so you still have all the rules like they can't lie and don't drink the wine, and you still like get those vibes. So the Mortal Instruments series is like it's a huge universe. So you have 7 in the original series, and then you have the Clockwork Angel series, which is a spin-off set in like the 1800s, and there's 3 in that one, and then you have the Bane Chronicles, and then you have, like, there's so many. It's like a whole universe at this point, but start with the Mortal Instruments. That will be your main series. A spin-off of it is Lady Midnight. I just read this a couple months ago. This one also has fairies in it, and one of the main characters does spend a significant portion before the book starts in the fairy world, so you kind of see how that impacted him and affected him. So I would say that there's more fairies in this one than the Mortal Instruments, but I've only read the first one of this series. So another idea out there. I love Cassandra Clare. I love this world. I love this universe. So I would say hop in. hop in for the fairies and just hop in general. Another YA author is Holly Black. I think she's written some new adult books now, but her Cruel Prince series, so her Folk of Air series, first book being The Cruel Prince, probably have seen it on a lot of book platforms. It's considered a YA series. I do think in like the second or third book there's some like light touching or something like that. I can't quite remember, but I don't think there's any like full scenes. So you should be good there. And I love the series. Okay, I love the series. I love the main character. It is very much like you are in the fairy world, you are playing by fairy rules, and humans aren't gonna come out on top. So it's amazing. It gives me like mysticism. Again, the main character's flawless. Lots of people don't love the series. I think one, because they go in thinking it's a romance. It's really not. There's a subplot of a romance, but if you go into it thinking it's gonna be a fantasy romance, you're gonna be let down. Okay, the romance is not that prevalent. And it's also a bully romance, and I don't love bully romances. But if you don't love bully romances, don't worry about it, because I just ignored that the romance was happening at all, and I loved the main character. So, don't go into it thinking it's a romance. Go into it thinking fairy, magic, fantasy, amazing main character. And I think you'll love it. Also, people don't love the last book, and I think it's also because they forget that they're reading a fairy story. Again, you're in the fairy world. Fairy stuff is gonna happen. You're playing by fairy rules. It's all word games and puzzles and magic. So I really like the ending. I really love the whole series. Honestly, the first book was my least favorite of it all, but the second and third, gorgeous, love it. Jude is one of my favorite characters forever. Holly Black, again, author of the Folk of Air series, has also written another series called Modern Fairy Tales. It is obviously fairies. So that one, I read the first book, Teeth, like when it came out, and I didn't love it because I just remember I found it very cringy because like it was very like heavily romance dominated, and I didn't read for the romance at that point. Like I only really started reading romance and enjoying romance this past year. So when I read Teeth a couple years ago, I really didn't like it. I really didn't like it. But now I'm like, I wonder if I'd be more interested in hopping into that series. But if you want fairies, if you want romance, and if you like Holly Black's writing, she does have a whole nother fairy series. So check that out. And then in January, the spin-off of her Folk of Air series just got released. The first one, The Stolen Air. It follows her brother. And I really want to get into that one, but I'm not in a fairy mood right now, and I want to save it because I know I'm going to love it, or I hope I'm going to love it. So I really want to save that one for later. Those are all the ones I have that really have no spice in them, or like very minimal, as in only like innuendo type things. If you want spicy fairies, I've got several more on that list. So, ACOTAR is spicy. Crescent City, I'm pretty sure is spicy. Again, haven't read that one. You also have These Hollow Vows. So that one is a duology. It follows a girl, again, kind of like Renaissance-esque era, and then the fairy world exists, people know the fairy world exists, and she crosses over one night to kind of like try to find her sister, who she believes has been taken by these fairies, and uncover things, and she kind of ends up in a game of like Seelie versus Unseelie Court, who is really her friends, where are her allegiances, and it kind of is like acting with both sides while trying to like unravel this mystery. I didn't love it. I felt that it was a little slow and like weirdly paced in places. Also, it's not super spicy, so it's definitely the lower end of the spice, which is why I'm kind of starting with it. In the first book, there's like some light over the pants stuff, but nothing like too descriptive or anything like that, or at least not that I remember. At the time, the second one wasn't out when I read the first one. Now it is out. I will probably go back and read it at some point. I might even reread the first one to see if I appreciate it more. But again, I'm not in my fairy era, so that will be coming up eventually. I'll get back into it. Trust me, I love fairies. Hence why I have so many for this list. So that's a duology you can check out. It's These Hollow Vows and Those Twisted Bonds, I believe. Another fairy series that I haven't finished, I don't finish series, is House of Lies and Sorrow. This is a series that I just don't want to finish. I have no interest in continuing reading, but I think it's because when I read it, I very much had been crushing a lot of fairy, and so it just ended up feeling very done, very played, like it was just a mixture of other books. Had I read it maybe in between some other books, it might not have felt like that, but it didn't really like jump out to me as anything spectacular. I did like the intro. So basically it opens with this girl being like, "This is the day I die." And you're like, "Oh, is it?" And she's like, "Yep, my dad promised me to this fairy king to be his bride, but the fairy kills all his brides. So I know I'm going to die tonight." And then she gets there and the king's like, actually I don't think he's the king, maybe he's a prince. But the prince is like, "So all my brides die because someone in my family is murdering them, and I'm going to use you as bait to figure it out." And then it's them trying to figure out who's trying to kill her and who's trying to get at the prince. Again, it had its moments. I wouldn't necessarily say I would never pick up the second book, but I'm not dying to. Kind of felt a little like done, kind of felt a little like weird emphasis on certain things when I was more interested in other aspects. So it is what it is. Wasn't really for me, but again, it's an option. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so it's a free option for, I mean, it's not free, but to me, it's free because it's included in something I already pay for. So you can check that out. Another one on Kindle Unlimited is Of Mist and Shadow. I didn't actually get all the way through this, and this is when I stopped reading Fairy, and I knew that like I was just kind of like done with Fairy for a little bit. This was like an absolute formulaic read. Like it felt like it was trying to cram every trope, every like cool feature from other fairy stories into this one book, and it just did not work, and it did not happen, and I didn't really feel like it had an original concept of its own. It read kind of like fan fiction-y to me, but if you're gonna write fan fiction, great. I love to read fan fiction, but you know, give credit where credit's due, kind of thing. This just, it felt like the author was trying to take original credit for something that really just fundamentally was not their own. They just changed a couple things, so I didn't love that. I know it was on the book platforms for quite a while. I haven't seen it in a little bit, but I know other people really enjoyed it, so maybe it's just me. It's just my opinion, and also maybe it was just me reading. As a mood reader, I tend to read a lot of the same thing back to back to back, and then I push myself out of it. It's how I left my Mafia era. It's how I left my Fairy era. Like, these are all trends. Okay, eventually I'll get back into it. Okay, and then these last three I really, really liked. So you have the Never King series, and the last book of that one just got released a couple weeks ago. I've not read the last one yet, but I'm very excited too. The Never King series is kind of like a dark romance, fairy romance type of thing. So it's like a dark retelling of Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. So two of the main Lost Boys are fairies. There's like a fairy faction that kind of has tensions with like the Peter Pan faction. So not all the main characters, all are fairies, and it doesn't really become an integral part of the story until like later on in the first book and then into, I would say, the third. But the aspects are definitely there, the elements are definitely there, and two characters are fairies, so you get to see them like work their magic. Also, like Peter Pan and I think Vale is his name, they're not considered fairies. I don't think I consider them fairies. They have very, very similar dispositions, very similar powers. So overall, it just gives me massive fairy vibes. This is definitely the Tinkerbell, but like with the other, not the Disney spelling, the other spelling. So definitely check out that series, even if you just want like a dark, fun romance retelling. Check it out. I love it. They're very short books. I crushed the first three like in like 2 days, I think, and I was dying for the fourth, and I had to wait like 4 months for it to be released. So I did want to get into that one immediately, but I've been trying to read down my shelves and it's not working. But when in the summer, when I can read more ebooks, that will definitely be coming up. And then of course we have Fortuna Sworn and Restless Slumber. I'm sure you've heard me talk about this a lot. They were just in my monthly wrap up. I did a whole video just dedicated to these two books. This is a fairy series. This is a fantasy romance fairy series. Mostly takes place between the contemporary world and the Unseelie Court. There's 4 books out in the series right now. There's a 5th coming in August. I've only read the first 2, but I'm dying to get into the next 2. Dying, but I want them in physical copy. If you want to listen more about this series, I do have a whole video on it. There are spoilers in that one though, so if you don't want spoilers but you still want a fairy, I'm just gonna hold this one up because it's pretty. But this follows a girl. She lives in the contemporary world. Her brother has been missing for 2 years, and she is a creature. So she knows that the fairies exist. She knows that there's a whole fairy world. She's not a fairy. She's a creature. I'm not gonna tell you what she is, but she's a creature that kind of like exists like kind of in the in-between. Like she lives in the human world, but she's not really human. And then one day this fairy approaches her and he's like, hey, I know where your brother is, but you have to marry me to find him. And she was like, I will do anything for my brother. Okay. And that's essentially the first chapter. So then they go to the fairy world and she tries to get her bearings, figure out what's going on. She studies their history. She learns what she has to kind of complete the things she needs to get to her brother. And yeah, so all the fairy vibes are there. I wouldn't say it's as like magical or as image based or like image driven as say like the Iron Fae, because the court is very like gloomy. It's supposed to be that way and it's that way for a reason, but I didn't really get that whole like magical feeling being at court. But I did still really like the series. Of what I've read so far, I really, really like the second one. I didn't love the first one. I loved the second one. So definitely give that a read. Go check out that video if you have read it and let me know your comments down below, because I really want to get into the 3rd and 4th one and I don't know what to expect. And then the last one I have for this list is Frost. I really, really enjoyed this one. I think I might have given it 5 stars. I probably gave it 4, but I really enjoyed it. So basically it opens on this girl. Again, she's like half fairy or full fairy, but she lives in the human world. The humans have just like recently in the last like generation found out that the fairy world does exist, and they treat the fairies as celebrities. So the Fairy King announces that he is going to host essentially a reality TV show to find his new queen, and it's going to be based on like trials and you have to like pass these tests and stuff, but it's all going to be broadcasted for the humans. And this fairy girl gets dumped on this day and accidentally runs into the king and just is like a mess and basically obliterates him and like embarrasses herself with this like verbal diarrhea that happens. And he approaches her and he's like, I want you to enter my competition. I'm going to help you win. And she was like, why? So then you kind of figure out what's his motivations. Why is he doing this? Why is it like a reality TV show? You follow them kind of getting to know each other and a better understanding. You also have the trials. I loved it. I had so much fun with it. The second book got released January? Another one I will be getting into this summer for sure. I don't care if I'm in a fairy mood or not. I want to get into it. I want to get into it. I say that a lot, but also understand there's a lot I want to get into, so. And that's another ebook read for me. So just kind of like finish off the video. I didn't love ACOTAR, but the part I liked best were the trials. So if you want that like trial feeling, The House of Lies and Sorrows has trials. Frost has trials. So good. So good. Highly recommend Frost. And Fortuna Sworn has trials. So again, highly recommend those two. But I love fairies in general. I love all fairies. Spice, no spice, I don't care. Definitely my favorites of the list would be The Cruel Prince, #1. And then in no particular order for the rest of them would be like, I loved Frost, Fortuna Sworn, The Mortal Instruments, The Iron King would probably be like my top ones. But that's the whole list. Let me know, did I miss any? Do you have any fairy recommendations? Because I'm sure there are so many more out there that I haven't even touched on. I have some on my TBR that I haven't read yet. But for this video, I wanted to cover the books that I have read. Aside obviously from like the whole ACOTAR series. But that's all I got for you guys for this video. So I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you've read any of these. And I will see you all next Friday. Bye!